Mutation. It is the key to our evolution. It has enabled us to evolve from a single-celled organism into the dominant species on the planet. This process is slow, normally taking thousands and thousands of podcasts. But every few hundred millennia, one podcast will focus on the underrated mutants, the underrated Xmen, if you will. And that podcast is now. Engage. Hello and welcome to Geek History Lesson. I am Jason Cerebro Inman.
I am Ashley Victoria Robinson. Welcome to the Mind University, because you have stumbled onto the podcast where we take one character, construct, or X-person from popular culture and teach you everything you need to know about them in about an hour, except when we don't, because this week we're doing a list.
Yes, and also this week we got to tell you about something before we get to talking about all those mutants that we hate and fear, but also serve and protect us. This very week, the week this podcast comes out, San Diego Comic-Con is going to be blowing up the internet with all the kinds of announcements. And there's going to be a lot of X-Men announcements, which is the reason why we decided to pick and do this show about X-Men characters. But Ashley and I, listeners of Geek History Lesson, we are going to San Diego Comic-Con in San Diego, California. So if you're making it down there, we want to meet you. And also, we want to give you a chance to get a signed copy of Jupiter Jet, our comic book. We want you to get a chance to get a signed copy of my book, Super Soldiers, and even a Geek History Lesson pin. So, we will only be at San Diego Comic-Con on Saturday, July 20th, and we're going to be at two spots. We have two signings. We're going to be at the Geekscape booth, which is our regular booth that we go to every year. That is booth 3919 from 11:30 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. You can come by, say hi to us, get a picture for us. You don't even have to buy anything. Just come by and say hello. We really want to meet you. The other place we're going to be is in Artist Alley, and we're going to be at booth CC-02. Now, if you can't find that number, it's going to be kind of hard to read. That's fine. It is the booth of Andy Poon, who is an artist and designer for the Arrowverse. He's amazing. He's a very good friend of ours, and he's going to let us share his table from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. So those are the two places we're going to be. Booth 3919 from 11:30 a.m. to 12:30, and booth CC-02 in Artist Alley from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. Come by, say hi, and if you see us walking around the con, stop us, say hi. We want to meet you. But we're Saturday, July 20th in San Diego. Yeah. We want to have a little confab of the Mind University people. And also, you can tell us whether you disagree with this entire list.
You can share your list with us. That's
Ashley,
more the way we want.
Yeah. What are we talking about today?
We are talking about the top 5 underrated X-Men characters and...
Did you talk about mutation?
Students, yes, Professor, we are.
Did you know I'm looking for hope? Is there hope in this list?
There is, and it's pretty groovy.
Is it a groovy mutation?
It is a groovy mutation.
Very well. I will leave you now.
Bye.
That was his chair.
Yes, thank you. Students, we had a hard time defining what underrated means. As you know, in the past when we've done lists, we try to lay out pretty clear criteria.
But underrated is a very nebulous word.
It is. And, you know, arguably some of the main X-Men characters could be considered underrated. 100%. But we don't want to talk about
Let's explain
them.
that. There's a character you really wanted to talk about on this list, and I was like, you can't.
Well, I think arguably my favorite X-person, Nightcrawler, could be considered underrated or perhaps underutilized. I think the same thing about Colossus. But given the fact that they have been mainstays of X-Men teams for decades and enjoyed their own solo series, it doesn't seem fair to feature them.
Bring, 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 bring.
Hello.
Hi, yeah, Tex Willerman here, oil magnate and owner of circuses in Germany. I'm looking for my friend. I heard my Nightcrawler sense was a tingling, and I think somebody was talking about Kurt, my good friend.
Let me see if Kurt's around, okay? I'll put him on the phone for you.
All right, put me on hold.
Hello?
Oh, my God. Kurt! It's Tex Willerman.
Hi, Tex. How are you?
How you doing?
Oh, fine.
I heard somebody talking about you.
Well, your ear's burning.
They were. I got a Kurt sense.
But that could be hellfire, you know.
What?
hellfire.
No, I'm a good Methodist.
You're
Kurt.
a bad Catholic, though.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm not Catholic. That's right.
I am Catholic,
Yeah,
so
that's
I
right.
hold you to Catholic rules.
You know, I came over there, Kurt.
To Catholicism?
No, I came over to your place, remember? And we prayed together. We dined together. We did that
was
thing.
in the Christmas episode.
And you taught me some stuff about Judy. And I got to tell you, Kurt,
Yeah, that's
it
true.
has never been better in the bedroom, if you know what I mean.
I don't, and I don't want to know.
So, somebody's calling you underrated.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
I think that's poppycock.
Poppycock.
That is some poppycock.
You don't think I am underrated?
No, I think you are numero uno. And by the way, I'm going to say this right now. I think there should be a title. I'm going to throw out a name right now. Mm-hmm. I think you should, number one issue, Nightcrawler and the Cantankerous X-Men. What do you think?
You know, maybe we'll pass it on to Marvel and then see what the editors
That's
think.
cool. I'm just going to take my 15% off the top, and we're going to make this
Sure,
happen.
15% of nothing is still nothing.
Oh, but it's a good 15%, Kurt.
Okay,
All right. I get merchandising rights, too.
sure.
I have to make a plushie Kurt that says, every time you squeeze him, it goes, hi, Tex. Oh, I love it. I'm going to make it.
I want a prototype, though.
I mean, that's fine.
Okay.
All right, cool. You got to do it in person, too. This has been a good time. This has probably been our best talk, Kurt.
I know. I'm quite enjoying speaking with you.
I think me coming over to that church and us praying together really worked.
I think so. Maybe I will upgrade you to my press secretary by the end.
By the way, gotta tell you this. After our little meeting over in Europe, when I came to your church,
Yeah, at
gotta
Christmas.
say, the relationship with me and my horse has never been better.
What is your horse's name again?
Trigger.
Oh, that's a good name.
That's right. All right, I gotta go.
Okay, bye.
All right, bye.
Bye, Tex.
Click.
If someone wants to make me a plush Nightcrawler, I would like to have it. Thank
That
you.
says high text when you squeeze it.
Doesn't have to do that.
All right, so we're back to underrated X-Men.
Yeah.
But Nightcrawler has had a solo series. Nightcrawler has
of arguable quality,
been
but
on
sure.
several main X-Men teams.
And featured in the movies.
So for me, I would be like, I don't think you can call him underrated. Also, there are thousands of X-Men characters out there.
There's that one guy that's a tree.
Yeah.
There's one X person, I don't think he's ever been named, but in sort of
Groot
all
Light?
modern X-Men, they'll draw him walking through, I'm assuming it's a him, that's very heteronormative of me. They will draw them walking through the hallways or
Yeah.
coming down the stairs. It's just a tree.
Oh, cool. All right.
So
I don't know who that person is.
I don't
please
either.
let us know. So we made this rule for our list, and once you follow it, and you make your list of the top 5 underrated X-Men characters, please share that list to us on social media. Where at, Ashley? We want to read them.
geekhistorylesson.com, facebook.com/geekhistorylesson, or on Twitter @GHL Podcast.
That's right. Okay, so here are your rules. You're going to make your top 5 underrated X-Men characters. The rule is this. This character can never have a solo ongoing series. So no Nightcrawler, no Cable, no X-Man.
That's funny because Cable is on a lot of other people's composite
Mm-hmm.
lists for underrated X people.
A mini series is okay, but not an ongoing series. All right. Also, this character, whoever's on this list, can never, not once, have been a main team member on a team in Uncanny X-Men or X-Men. So X-Force characters are fine. X-Factor characters are fine. I would even say Extreme X-Men characters are fine, but not a team in Uncanny X-Men or X-Men. And I bring up Cable again because Cable was a team member on Uncanny X-Men.
And if you are familiar with the podcast, obviously a Jason Inman favorite.
Yes. That also discounts Maggot, who is a lesser-known character. Maggot was a main team member on Uncanny X-Men for a while.
Well, let's be honest. Maggot wasn't going to make it on either of our lists.
I would have put Maggot on my list if he hadn't.
Really?
Yeah, because he's due for a reboot. He is underappreciated.
Interesting.
So Ashley, let's hop right into those lists. We know the rules right now, and let's start with our number 5. Ashley, who is the number 5th X-Men?
So my number
Underrated.
My number 5 is 2 people, but they sort
Is
of
it a tie?
They sort of operate as one people. They always operate together. I'll tell you their government names, and you see if you know who they are. Their government names are Arthur and James.
Artie and Lich?
Yeah! I love Artie and Lich. I think I put them on my X-Men team when we did that years and years ago. Because I
put Devil Dinosaur on my X-Men team.
You did. I still maintain that's not a acceptable choice. Mm-hmm. They are both low-key, incredibly powerful mutants, except they are children, so they're not really allowed to operate with any type of autonomy. But I think if they were allowed to operate with autonomy, or if they were perhaps to be aged up, because they're about 11 or 12 right now.
Depending on who's writing them, yes.
Yeah, I think they could be a real force to be reckoned with.
Okay.
If you are not familiar with these characters, really quick, Artie Maddox, a.k.a. Arthur. He is a human mutant, and his abilities are he has the ability to telepathically project images. So if you've seen X2, he's basically Jason Stryker's son. But his powers
But not specifically that character.
No. But that's the closest analog that I can come up with. But he is incredibly, incredibly powerful. So he can project these fantasies over huge groups of people. And then Leech is interesting because he's kind of operates in a different way. His name is James Jimmy Dorian Leech, a.k.a. Leech. He is, of course, a human mutant. And he has power negations. So he's like Rogue, except he doesn't have to touch you and you won't die.
He's been in an X-Men movie.
Both of them have been in X-Men movies.
But Leech is primarily, he's the mutant that is the cure is derived from in X-Men The Last Stand.
Yes, but neither of them speaks.
No. Leech does a little bit, but not much.
But neither of them are main characters, so I felt confident putting them in this list. They're paired up initially because Leech can depower or dampen Artie his powers don't get out of control. But then they're actually really well featured in the FF miniseries that came out of Marvel Now, and you get to see how they operate as a single unit and how powerful they are together. And I think that if they could get that kind of focus in a mainstay X book, they've never been in an X-Men X book, either of them, or as a unit. They have been team members of X Factor, probably most prominently, other than the Future Foundation. I think if you put them on an X-Men team with the right dynamic, of course, and the right training, they could be the next sort of Jean Grey level power, and I would love to see that explored.
They have been main characters in an X-Men book, but it wasn't the two we mentioned.
Yes.
They were main characters for Generation X.
Yes, they were.
Which is the spin-off title. It was the storyline right after Heroes Reborn. That's where Franklin Richards lived, in the secondary Xavier School, and Artie and Lich kept his powers in control.
Yep.
Yeah.
They do have a lot of crossover with the Fantastic Four universe because they're basically peers of Franklin. They're about the same age. Like I mentioned, they're in Future Foundation. I have another character higher up on my list who's also very heavily involved in the FF.
Oh, interesting. I will tell you this. He's not on my list, and he is a mutant. I considered putting Franklin on this list.
Interesting.
I consider it because he is a mutant. So that's very interesting.
Yeah. So Artie and Lich, and also just because I think they're cool and I want to see them in more things.
Cool.
Doing more stuff.
Yeah, that's fine.
So Jason, what is your number 5?
My number 5, speaking of Generation X, is a character known as Chamber. He's one of my favorite X-Men characters. Chamber is Jonathan Jono Evan Starsmore. He has the ability to cast energy blasts from his chest, and he actually had limited control of his power because when his mutant power manifested, it destroyed the upper half of his chest and the lower part of his face. And he does not eat, he does not drink, he does not breathe. It's actually believed that his mutant power turned him into a living, breathing psionic energy, and his body is just the shell. I think that Jono or Chamber is literally the manifestation of what mutant powers can do to you. And also, I'm going to say, disability. Because he is literally, you can see it every time he walks around. Now, his first appearance is in Generation X #1, and they go pick him up from the airport. He's a character created by Scott Lobdell and Chris Bacalo, but he is a character that never gets out of his funk. Like, he never gains full control of his abilities, and he actually grows more depressed when Sync, who was another Generation X member who was on my X-Men team.
Yes, he was.
Who has the power to duplicate a mutant's powers. He was able to use Jono's mutant powers better than Chamber ever was. Now, there is one version of Chamber. It's in the Age of Apocalypse storyline where Chamber is actually, it didn't happen that way. He didn't blow up his chest and didn't blow up his face. So he has this sort of like Havoc. He has this costume where he has this like little circle in his chest.
Focal point.
It's like a cannon. And that's where like it's like kind of like Cyclops, and it comes like straight from his heart. And in the Age of Apocalypse, he like is basically a cannon. He's a living cannon.
That's
that
cool.
If he shoots you, it's going to knock you on your ass or open up a wall or whatever. But Chamber, they also made a really cool action figure of him when they did Generation X action figures. Anyways, back in the day when they made X-Men action figures about everything, Chamber to me is a character. You've seen him in Uncanny X-Men. Like he later on becomes one of the teachers during Grant Morrison's run, but he's not a member of the team. And I kind of think Chamber is a character that definitely deserves more attention. Chamber would be an interesting character to feature in a movie, although very heavy CGI because he's walking energy. But he's just a tragic character. And the idea of the X-Men are all about representing disenfranchised and undervalued minorities. And Chamber is the mouthpiece for disabilities. By the way, when his accident happened and he blew off half his face and blew his chest, he actually injured his girlfriend, making her a paraplegic. And
so they basically took Rogue's story but made it more interesting.
Yes, exactly. Here's the thing. He stayed with her.
Oh, I love that.
He eventually broke up with her, but originally he stayed with her. He stayed with her. It's the X-Men. They're teenagers, of course.
Yeah.
But originally he stayed with her.
That's nice.
But again, I was like, oh, it's the double down. If I ever had control of the character, I'd marry him to that girl. Can
she speak? Do you know?
Yes. Yeah. I think it just like hit her legs.
Yeah.
But
you said I thought quadriplegic. You said paraplegic. My apologies.
Yes. She's basically like a Barbara Gordon.
Yeah.
So, but Chamber, I think, is one of the most interesting X-Men concepts in a long time, focused in a singular person, and he's so underrated.
Love it.
So there you go. All right, Ashley, who is your number 4?
My number 4
Franklin Richards?
Is not Franklin Richards. Also starts with an F, though. A character that...
Fancy Dan.
No. I think you mean Dapper Dan.
No, Fancy Dan. He's a member of the Enforcers.
Great. Is a character that I have learned a lot about recently because I taught our Storm episode.
Is it Storm?
No, it's Forge. Starts with an F.
Oh, I think Forge has been on an X-Men team.
So Forge was introduced in Uncanny X-Men. He has been on an X-Men team. However. All
right.
Because if you're not familiar with Forge, because Forge is basically their mechanical person. He's the one designing their weapons. He's not going out in the field, and he doesn't have as much coverage as the rest of his teammates. So I'm calling a bit of a mulligan on this one.
I will give this to you.
Because you like Forge?
Because I like Forge, and I was going to put him on my list until I remember that he was on an X-Men team. But I will accept Forge. It's fine. Tell us about Forge.
So Forge is a Native American technopath genius who's also connected to his native ancestors and spirit guides, which I think are two totally interesting things to meld because it's literally science versus magic in one dude. And I love that about him. I think he could be a real asset to any of the movie teams.
Well, his mutant power is to be able to build machines that nobody has ever thought of before.
Yeah.
And there have been storylines where Forge is building a machine and characters will come by and be like, what are you building? He's like, I don't know.
Yeah,
and
he's just building stuff.
And then when they turn it on, it like is this amazing miracle machine.
But in a lot of Uncanny X-Men and a lot of his later appearances, he's the guy in the chair to take the Spider-Man analog.
In the Ultimate Universe, he's a villain.
That's horrifying. Don't do that to my sweet baby Forge.
He builds all of Magneto's evil inventions.
Yeah, that's a fun twist on the character. I think in modern comics he's really under-repped. He's very much a product of this sort of Claremont late era of X-Men, and I just think he's a character who could be much better utilized. And if you put him on a movie team, then you don't have to have Charles operating as the guy in the chair all the time. You bring some diversity to a team. And the problem with X-Men teams, both in the comics and then in any other on-screen adaptation, is there's too many characters with overlapping powers.
Yes, agreed.
There's too many psychics. There's too many people who can
Way
fly.
too many or telekinesis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Forge doesn't do the same thing as almost anyone else.
Yeah, you're correct. No.
So whether you decide to lean into the Native American spiritualism, which would be great, like if you got a great consultant in that could be so cool. Or if you decide to lean into like the genius level technopathy, that's completely singular. No one else does that. And it makes more sense for it to be a character like him than, again, like Charles or like Beast, as they've kind of tried to do in the first. Beast is better in the field, I think, or as a doctor.
Like in the movie First Class, that's Beast. Like imagine if it had been Forge.
Yeah. And we don't have a lot of Native American or First Nations representation in X-Men.
Comics.
Well, in comics at all, but especially outside. The X-Men have a few really cool Native American characters, but they always get what's her name? Moonstone? Danielle?
Are you talking about Legion of Superheroes?
I am. Yeah.
It's I think Dawnstar.
Yeah. But I just like Forge so much. I think he would be so cool. And if you're gonna do Storm, which we both advocated for on our Geek History Lesson Extra podcast, I would really love to see their relationship explored. Even though, as we came to the conclusion, they're just gonna marry her off to T'Challa.
I want to talk about Forge.
Okay. Since he was almost on your list.
Well, I like Forge a lot. So, and there's two reasons I like Forge. Forge has a great run in X Factor. He has a great X Factor run. He also is really amazing, and I first loved him in the Age of Apocalypse.
It's funny. I think a lot of the characters, him and two other characters on my list, kind of come out of Age of Apocalypse.
Well, Forge existed way before the Age of Apocalypse. Do you know what Forge does during the Age of Apocalypse?
No.
Forge is a main character in X-Men.
Oh, your favorite.
Yes. Nate Gray, who is the...
Does he build that giant gun for him?
No. So in the Age of Apocalypse, Forge is an acolyte of Magneto because in the Age of Apocalypse, Magneto runs the X-Men. Forge has been with the X-Men since the very beginning. And he has been so devout in following Magneto's war against Apocalypse that Forge only has 2 pieces of his original human body left.
Oh, so he's cyborg.
Yes, it's like his face and his chest, and everything else he has built his body parts.
Interesting.
Now, the reason why he's so interesting in X-Men is that in that universe, Nate Gray is from Jean Grey and Scott Summers, right? And Mr. Sinister has built Nate Gray as a weapon against Apocalypse. Now, Forge's power, right, is to realize how machines work. So he looks at this living genetic weapon and figures out, he teaches the boy how to use his powers. Two, he basically teaches the boy how to be a human. He becomes Nate Gray's father.
I didn't know that.
And Nate Gray considers Forge his father. And the interesting thing about it, again, because you got to realize Nate Gray walked out of the tube as 18. He never grew up. So he comes out and he's basically an infant. And Forge makes him a human because he can see. And I think that's one of the that's where my real love of Forge came from, was X-Men, because he's Nate Gray's dad. And yeah, it's really cool. That's why I love Forge. Forge definitely deserves more spotlight, and he just got a really cool action figure too. Yeah, I just think action figure spotlight. I just think he would be so good in live action. He would be such an asset. I moved my microphone way closer to my mouth, so if I suddenly became louder for everybody, I apologize. That's okay. It sounded like I was in an echo chamber. I don't know. Yeah, our microphones kind of low-key hate Jason, so it's an ongoing battle. It is. So that's my... If only I was Forge. Number 4. Yeah, you could fix it instantly. Good choice. Was Forge because of me? Because I love Forge a lot. I knew who Forge was before then, but mostly doing the research for Storm and reading Life Death. Yeah. And then diving a little more into his character, I was like, Forge is really cool. Because you didn't know about that story, and I was like, you have to read Life Death. Yeah. And I'm so glad that I did, because not only do I think it's Storm's best thing. Oh, 100%. It's probably Forge's best story, too. I would say probably, but it's opened me up to a new character to love. And that's kind of what we're hoping to do with this list, is we're hoping to inspire you guys to check out these great characters. So, Jason. Yes. Even though you chipped in on my number 4. Sorry. No, I love it. I love Forge. Who is your number 4? My number 4. Lassie. I knew you were going to put him on your list. Oh, you're wrong. My number 4 is Theresa Maeve Rook Cassidy, better known as Siren.
Oh, I assumed this was Banshee.
The daughter of Banshee.
Oh, because Banshee's been on too many X teams?
Well, no. I actually like Siren better. So Theresa is an Irish mutant who possesses a sonic scream, which is capable of incapacitating, injuring an opponent's hearing and sending powerful vibrations through the air. She can use these vibrations to fly. It's the same powers as her dad. Now, I love, Banshee. Mm-hmm. Love Banshee. I think he's one of the X-Men characters who is from Giant Size X-Men that kind of gets forgotten.
He appeared on a lot of amalgam lists that I consulted when I was researching for this episode.
Yes. He doesn't get the credit that he's due. And also, I learned to love Banshee from Generation X. He's the headmaster of Generation X. It's Banshee. Now, I think Theresa kind of succeeds as her father, because Theresa at a couple points becomes a leader of X-Force, Cable's team, and she is there. But the interesting thing is that she turns into a hero because she starts out with Black Tom Cassidy, who is Banshee's brother, who's evil. Black Tom Cassidy is the one who teaches Theresa how to do her powers.
Oh, interesting.
Not Banshee. Because Banshee didn't want her to get in the superhero game. And Black Tom was like, come with me. Come with me, kid. I'll teach you. I don't know if that was Irish or not.
It was pretty Irish.
So her partner for a long time was Juggernaut. So Siren is this person who started out in criminal ways and not good and against her dad, and then eventually employed the name Siren and became a member of X-Force and eventually took the name of Banshee once they killed Banshee off in the comic books. Now, the interesting thing is that I learned to love Siren because she is in the greatest Deadpool run of all time. She's a main character.
The Joe Kelly run?
The Joe Kelly run.
Oh, that's actually funny.
has a romantic love interest in Siren. And Siren is the one that invites Deadpool to move into the X-Mansion. Very much the Colossus role from the movies because of her criminal past.
Oh, so she has empathy.
Yes, and she's like, you can be redeemed, you can do this stuff like that. And the whole run is about like Deadpool being like, am I going to be a hero? And he does it because he falls in love with Siren.
Can I say that I think the name Siren is a very intelligent choice because Sirens and Banshees are from two different mythologies. Banshees are actually from Irish mythologies. Yeah. Sirens obviously being Greco-Roman. They serve similar functionalities. So I kind of think that's very smart. It's very interesting.
I will also say I am doing her a lot of disrespect because she's now Banshee. And she has earned that title. But I kind of think Siren's the better name. But anyways, her costume is exactly like her dad's, which I think is really cool.
You love, of course.
And I love
you love that about Mayday Parker as well.
I love that striped cape. I love that striped cape. But Banshee...
have they made an action figure of her?
I don't know.
If you want to make Jason a custom Siren action figure.
They've been making a lot of X-Men action figures lately, people, so we're going to be talking about these X-Men action figures.
Yeah.
But Siren is my number 4. I think she's a character that definitely should be in her dad's role on a main X-Men team.
Would you like to see her show up in a future Deadpool movie?
Yes. I'm actually surprised she hasn't. Because again, you can tell the makers of that movie, okay, Blind Owl, the character in that movie, comes from the Joe Kelly run.
Yeah.
So like, they've read it.
Yeah.
So like, why haven't they done Siren? Especially since in a lot of the X-Men comic books, whenever, X-Force, when Domino leaves to go do some bounty hunter mission, Siren becomes Cable's lieutenant.
Well, Disney, who now owns Deadpool, can hire Jason at any time to script Deadpool 3 for them.
I would love to do it. Did you know of Siren?
I did not, and you've made a very compelling case for her.
She's a really cool character.
Yeah.
But, I love Banshee.
I do.
But Siren's the better character.
I truly thought you were going to put Banshee on your list.
Siren's just better.
Yeah.
She's a better character.
I would have argued with you. You could have, of course, made a case for it, being a person who just did that. I would have argued that Banshee is too well repped to be on this list.
Again, he is...
Even though I think in contemporary comics he is probably disserviced.
He is part of the giant size X-Men.
Yeah.
So it's... that's the reason why... a part of the reason why I couldn't put him on this list. So there you go.
Cool.
All right, Ashley, who is your number 3?
My number 3 is a character that every time we talk about who should be in an adaptation or who should be on an X-Men team, I bring up. I think she's so cool. She came out of Astonishing X-Men, and her name is Hisako Ichiki, and she is Armor. I love Armor so much.
Technically a main X-Men cast member. Technically.
Only an Astonishing X-Men.
Okay, sure. Oh, an Astonishing X-Men's not uncanny. Okay, there.
And only as she's a student who basically gets recruited onto the team. She's not a mainstay member of the team.
I'll give it to you.
But I get it's a stretch. It's a stretch.
Sustained.
If you are not familiar with Armor, she's a tiny little Japanese girl, and she can generate impenetrable psionic, basically exoskeleton armor that also gives her superhuman strength, invulnerability, reflexes, and basically makes her the Hulk.
Yeah.
But without the attitude problem. I think she is so cool. I love her look because she's designed by John Cassaday. She looks so amazing. Everyone else who's drawn her looks amazing. I would love to see her let loose. They don't generally give super strength or super the ability to super punch something. Yeah, to a female character. And other than She-Hulk. And I would love to see that explored. I would love to see her fill Colossus's role on an X-Men team. And
she could do that. I think that's kind of the role she took on in Astonishing X-Men.
It was, yeah.
She's now joined a couple of New Mutants and New X-Men teams.
Yes.
I've seen her around.
And she is, I think she's
currently in Age of X-Men, the storyline that's happening right now. She's in it. And
she's a character who is always on the outskirts.
Yeah.
She's always on the New Kids team since she was first introduced in 2004.
Even though weirdly she was on the main team right out the gate.
Yeah. I think she's aged maybe about 3 whole years.
You can
since
tell.
then, but she's never fully involved in the action. She's never a fully fleshed out character, which I think is so disappointing.
Let me ask you this, because you can tell this in the storyline that she's introduced by Joss Whedon, that she's his Kitty Pryde. Exactly.
Yeah.
Plus minus in terms of what do you feel about that?
For me personally,
it's a little bit of a minus for me.
For me personally, Kitty Pryde is my favorite female X character. So for me, it's a plus.
And Kitty Pryde's in that run.
She is, but she's an adult in that, right? Sure. And that's when she first becomes a teacher and she becomes the headmistress for a while. Joss Whedon, the more we learn about him...
Well, let's not go down that road.
And the more we get away from him, the harder it is to love him.
You sure?
And honestly, Astonishing X-Men is less good the more you read it, except that first volume.
Let's put this out there because I guarantee you there's a listener out there right now that's
who's mad, I know.
Who's like, what? But I love Buffy. Go Google Joss Whedon's accusations, my friends.
Yes.
That's all I will say. There is some shady stuff that he did in the past.
Yes. So... For me, from a character who lives in this world, I love her as the heir apparent to Kitty Pryde.
Okay.
Because I love Kitty Pryde. Even though I don't think she's been utilized as well as I think. Kitty Pryde was almost overutilized to a point.
Yes, 100%.
From a meta-narrative standpoint, by the person who created her, is it a little ho-hum? A little bit. But I will say at least they made her Japanese. I think that's great. And I love the imagery...
the design of her psionic armor, excuse me to interrupt you, is over her body is a very cool design. It
kind of looks like Baymax / the Michelin Man.
I always think it looks like Juggernaut.
It's see-through red, but it's soft and bubbly.
Yeah.
Which I think is interesting because it leans into that anime kind of cutesy design that you think of when you think of Japanese characters. But I love the idea... because Japan, famously suffered a couple bombings. I love the idea of a Japanese girl in impenetrable armor. I think that's also cool from a meta-narrative perspective. And she's a character that, like Artie and Lich, and she's been around a lot less than they have. I just want her to grow up. I want to see her meet her full potential. And I want to see her lead a team. Yeah. Because typically the X-Men characters that are women that get to lead teams don't have physical strength. I think it would be a neat way to flip the script on her. She leads her
kid team now. I don't know what it's called, but she leads the kid team now.
I think they're called the X-Men in Training.
I don't know what they're called. I don't read that title. I really think they're called the New X-Men. I'm not certain about that.
It could be. She's also a member of the New X-Men. But unfortunately, I would say most of the books that she's in are the middle of the road X books. I don't think she's been featured in a book that is worthy of how cool she is.
Nope.
And she's just a character that I want more from. Again, if you're looking at a movie casting, she brings some great diversity. And she has one of the coolest designs around. So I love armor. I want to see more of her. But she's not a character that has a ton of depth yet, knock on wood. So that's why I left her in the number 3 spot.
Okay.
Jason?
Yeah.
We're about half of the way through.
Yep.
Who's your number 3?
My number 3 is probably the most important X-Men character you've ever encountered. And I know you're like, why did you put them at number 3? Well, it's because he's that important. He's a weird duck. He's not a duck, but he's a weird person. He's very important. His mutant powers are extremely powerful. And it's only because he's only appeared in a couple of titles that people don't give him the importance that he so deserves. Because his design is amazingly iconic, and he's best friends with Wolverine. I am, of course, talking about the most important mutant of all time, Doop.
I almost put Doop on my list.
Doop, if you don't know who Doop is, he debuted in X-Force Volume 1, number 116. He is a green floating spheroid creature of unknown origins.
With an X on his chest.
With an X on his chest, who speaks in a language all his own. It has a text and a special font. It's kind of like R2-D2. The characters can understand him, but they don't. In audio terms, I would say that it sounds like... It sounds like that. That's how I think Doop sounds. I have a Doop action figure. Came with the Deadpool action figure in Marvel Legends. Only this is, again, we got a lot of merchandise.
I know.
There's no armor action figure, by the way.
I know there's not. If you want to send me a custom armor action figure, please do.
It'd be really cool. They had to make her just normal,
and then cast her in resin,
and then the shell can snap around her.
Oh, that'd be cool.
Yeah, but Doop has an action figure. It came with Deadpool. I don't know why, but it did. And so Doop appears in X-Force and X-Statix, which, if you listen to this podcast, X-Statix is what I named as the greatest X-Men storyline of all time. But Doop is said to be a product of the Cold War era U.S. military experiment, and he's basically the cameraman for the mutant superhero team X-Statix. Now, what his powers are, very nebulous. He can affect time and space. There's one point where in the Lacuna storyline in X-Force, Lacuna has the ability to stop time. Doop is not stopped. He can move around. Also, Doop faced down with Thor in an Avengers versus X-Statix storyline, and Doop was able to beat Thor.
My favorite thing about reading a Doop story is you have to remind yourself that Doop is a human mutant.
Yes.
Because he looks like a little green alien.
Yes, and now here's the thing. And this is the reason why Doop made it to my list. And you're going to see this common theme in my list, or you've already seen it. Chamber as well. I like mutants when their mutant ability doesn't make them look like just a human.
You also like them when they suffer.
Well, that's what the X-Men are about, like suffering. And I think Doop should be on a main X-Men team just for the reminder that people can be like, oh, this is what mutation can do to you. But also, like, Doop is just such a fun character. Everybody knows Doop. Doop is best friends with Wolverine.
I love it.
They have Wolverine show up in X-Statix several times, and Wolverine and Doop talk about all these adventures that we've never seen. But, like, apparently Wolverine owes all these favors to Doop because Doop has saved his life. It's quite amazing. Go Google him right now. Look up a character Doop. I just think, like, I want to stuff Doop 100%.
Oh, man, me too.
Talk about merchandise spotlight. And since the X-Statix are coming back in the Excellence, which I'm so happy about, by Michael Allred and Pete Milligan, the original team, I'm really hoping we get a stuffed Doop very, very, very soon. But anyways, if you don't know who Doop is, you need to find out who Doop is. Speaking of Doop, I see that we have somebody out in the hallway. Hold on. They're knocking on the door. I'm going to go let them in, Ashley.
Okay.
I think they need to come in here. Hold on a second.
Cool.
All right, here. Oh, man. Oh, bub, I'm not happy.
Hey, Logan, you're hairier than I remember.
Yeah, I'm pretty damn hairy.
What's up?
I'm pretty damn Canadian.
My fellow Canadian.
I'm here to file a grievance.
With me?
With you.
What did I do?
With that fella I just walked past.
Oh, yeah.
Geek history lesson.
Jason, okay.
There's this book out there. This book's called Super Soldiers.
Yeah, that's Jason's book. He wrote it.
Jason. It's about military comic book characters. And I gotta say, I'm pissed about it. Because I am not in it.
I know where you're going.
I am not in this book, bub.
Okay. Take some deep breaths.
Can't do that.
Can I?
My chest rib cage is made of steel.
You are
adamantium.
You are shaped like a fridge.
I am. And I'm very short.
Can I? I think we're about the same height.
I'm 5'3".
Can I explain to you why you're not featured?
Oh, you better have a good explanation.
Well,
my claws will come out schnickety-schnick.
Quick fun fact. You are mentioned.
What?
In the back. The final
in this book.
chapter. You are.
I am in this book by Jason Inman.
You are.
Okay.
But you don't have a full chapter because remember, buddy.
Why the hell not?
Buddy, We're Canadian. It's about American.
Oh, I forgot you were.
That's right.
Let me see. Hold on.
Smell the maple syrup?
Stratford, Ontario.
That's right.
Oh, yeah, I smelled it on you.
Yeah. But Super Soldiers...
I can smell your DNA, girly.
I bet you can. Super Soldiers features American superheroes who served in the American Armed Forces.
All right, we got to go down this list.
Because Jason did.
He served...
in the American Armed Forces.
I didn't see him at D-Day. I was at D-Day.
He's not that old.
Yeah, I was at D-Day. I served in the American Civil War, even though I'm Canadian.
I know, it's strange.
Weird, right?
Apparently you have a list, though.
Well, I just got to say, I'm going to go through this list right now. I think I'm better than all these poozers. Okay. Yeah, I stole a word from another company.
Yep.
Captain America. Mm-hmm. Fancy man with a flag on his chest. Mm-hmm. Hal Jordan.
You're definitely better than Hal Jordan.
He's a drunk.
Yep.
Yeah.
He's a pilot.
He's a drunk pilot. Carol Danvers.
For sure.
Drunk.
Yep. Another drunk pilot.
Yeah. Yeah. Frank Castle.
You're definitely better than Frank Castle.
Coward. Nuke.
Definitely better than him.
I chopped off his head once.
Yeah, it was great.
I did. So I'm better than all those bozos. Mm-hmm. So I don't understand why in his book he explains all of their themes and metaphors and comic book histories, comparing it to his own with very personal stuff in it. And I don't get the same treatment, damn it.
You do have 2 geek history lessons.
Not good enough. Not good enough, bub.
Well, I'll tell you what, if people go and pick up the book and then they go review it on Amazon and Goodreads, which helps in the algorithm and lets more people find it, and the book is successful enough, maybe Jason's second book will feature you.
Look, I'm going to say this. I've read some books, actually.
Mm-hmm, I bet.
I've read the DC Comics Encyclopedia All New Edition. Uh-huh. I've read The Secret History of Wonder Woman.
Oh, me too.
I've read The League of Regrettable Superheroes and The Legion of Regrettable Supervillains. All those books. Read them. You're telling me Super Soldiers just as good as those books?
If not better.
That sounds like some, as my friend Tex Williman would say, poppycock. Yeah.
I was hoping you were going to go with Hokum.
I mean, Hokum too. Man. All right. Maybe I shouldn't be so mad about this.
You know what? What if
maybe I shouldn't be mad about this book.
Maybe people will go
and
they'll pick up Super Soldiers and they'll pick up a great Wolverine story.
Enemy of the State.
Yeah.
It's really good.
Yeah.
It's on Amazon.
True.
Barnes & Noble.
Yep. Everywhere fine books are found.
Apple Books. Yeah. Same with Super Soldiers.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And you said this thing. You said this other thing. I was listening to you, bub. Mm-hmm. If I've read a book, then I should go to Amazon and leave a review. And
Goodreads, because you give an honest review, any level you like, say whatever you want. The fact that you engaged with it bumps it up in the algorithm, helps other awesome nerds find the book. And how many reviews do they need? 50. That's how it gets bumped up? That's right. Okay, so if you go see a book on Amazon, I don't even know what Amazon is. It's okay. But if I go to the Amazon jungle. And you see the book you like. And I see a book I like, and it only has 45 reviews, I should review it. Absolutely. Should review it 5 more times. Got it. All right. With 5 usernames. Well, you calm me down. Okay. You're like Shadowcat. Yeah. I like it. All right, I'm good. All right. You got any beer around this place? Oh, yeah, there's one by the fridge on your way out. Oh, okay, cool. Take as many as you want. We don't drink. Cool. All right, well, I'll see you later. All right. Oh, holy God. Oh, man. Hey. Is he hairier than you remember? Oh, my God. He stinks like a leather couch. I mean, wow, I just passed Wolverine. Yeah. Oh, that's cool. You know, I didn't put him in my book, right? Well, he's in that last chapter. Yeah, I guess. All right, speaking of books, let's go to our number 2. Yeah. Our number 2 of the top 5 underrated X-Men. Very interesting list so far. I've been very excited. I was unsure if this was going to be a good episode, actually. Just saying that. Yeah. Putting that out on Front Street. Mm-hmm. And you think it's been pretty good so far? I would give this... how many Bregos would you give this episode? I'd give this 8 out of 5 Bregos. Great, love it. What's your... who's your number 2 underrated X-Men? My number 2 is... Or woman. Someone you're going to fight me on. Absolutely. Do I need to get Wolverine back in here? Please don't. He smelled. My number 2 is the first mutant, Namor. Oh, I am going to fight you on that one. I think Namor's fine to be in this. But
Namor was a team member of an Uncanny X-Men book for over 15 issues.
You are correct.
The Extinction Team.
You are correct. However, Namor, during most of his appearances with the X-Men, is an adversary to them.
Yes, or like an
antagonist.
An unlikely ally.
And I think there is an incredible story out there where Namor has to lead the X-Men.
Oh, weird.
And I want to see it.
Okay, all right.
And I know he was developed as part of the...
I'll give it to you.
I know he was developed as part of the Fantastic Four.
Yeah.
But it is weird to me that as the first mutant, he exists so singularly outside of X-Men lore.
It's weird that they just made him a mutant. That doesn't make sense.
Yeah. And that when X-Men came around or later during any of the various retcons, he wasn't more integrated. And I think in a modern world where we're really into serialized storytelling, I think that's something that deserves to be explored. And I would love to see what Namor evolves into if you actually make him have to embrace this mutant community as a leader.
Okay.
So I think he makes it onto this list specifically for the fact that he was never created as an X-Men, but he carries the title of...
But you like him in the X-Men stories, like you read, where he's been a team member?
No.
Okay.
Not necessarily.
All right.
Namor's not a character I like.
I'm going to ask you this. In your X-Men storyline that's going to happen, do you want him to bring back the movie studio? Because as you know, if they're from our Fantastic Four episode, Namor ran a movie studio.
You know what?
Namor Pictures.
I would be okay if like Namorita or someone took over it.
Namorita. I hate Namorita.
There's well, what about Namora? Because there's 2 Namor lady spinoffs.
I hate them both.
No, I don't need the movie studio to ever come back, but I just think there's such an interesting thought experiment and writing experiment to be had by taking this character with this legacy.
Sure.
But making him have to deal with what the reality is for regular mutants. Because Namor is a character that like honestly enjoys a lot of privilege because he's a prince and he's wealthy and he's got weird pointy ears. So he doesn't suffer the same way that the rest of the X-Men suffer, which is
really
something
never suffered that much. Really.
Yeah, which is something that you've brought up. And wouldn't it be interesting to see him have to live under the same constraints as your the rest of the 99% of the mutants? He's the 1% of the mutants.
He's the 1% of the mutants. All right, cool.
And I know it's a weird choice, but I was looking through a list of mutants and I was like, man, like Namor as a member of the X-Men, I think is underrated and is a character with a good enough legacy that he deserves to be more featured.
Going to our merchandise spotlight, they have made Namor action figures, but it's always the one where he's in his Speedos.
Yes, which you don't like.
I want the Namor action figure where he's in his X-Men costume. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because he's a member of Jean Grey's X-Men Red.
He is.
Yeah.
But yeah, and
all right.
I think it would be really cool.
Cool.
Thank you for letting me pass.
Sure.
All right. Who is your number 2?
My number 2 is a blink and you miss it type of mutant. Blink. Mm-hmm. The Lady X-Man, who is an unstable mutant with the ability to teleport. Now, fun fact.
Hasn't she technically been on an X-Men team?
She has been on an Age of Apocalypse X-Men team, which was actually called the Astonishing X-Men.
Okay.
Otherwise, she's only been in Exiles. Mm-hmm. But I didn't know this until I did some research. I didn't realize that she actually appears before Age of Apocalypse. Mm-hmm. She's actually introduced in what I like to call the Phalanx, or Phalanx.
Phalanx.
The Phalanx, during the 1994 X-Men crossover called the Phalanx Covenant, as I like to say it.
Yep.
And actually, the character died within a couple months. And then in the Age of Apocalypse storyline, the parallel universe, she was redesigned by Joe Bandera, who's amazing. And as a result, she became more confident. And she was like one of the most powerful members of the team. Now, that is, of course, Blink. She is the pink girl with the green costume. And she has these like little crystal shards.
And they make them into Wolverine claws sometimes.
Yes. And they're amazing. And she later becomes the lead of the Exiles, the alternate reality time-hopping X-Men. But they should have resurrected her. They should have made her a main teamer because she was the most popular character of Age of X-Men. Age of Apocalypse, excuse me. And they just now made an action figure of her merchandise spotlight that looks amazing. She's in X-Men Days of Future Past.
Played by Fan Bingbing, an amazing actress.
Wow, what a great name.
Yeah.
I didn't know that was her name. Wow.
Yeah.
But she has such a great look. She has amazing powers, but I also understand that she's basically Nightcrawler.
Oh, she's in The Gifted as well, and she's played by the...
She's in The Gifted?
Yeah, but she's just a regular Asian girl. Sorry, don't know the actress's name off the top of my head. I could look it up, but I won't. She's played by the same actress who's the voice of Gogo Tamago in Big Hero 6.
Oh, nice. But Blink is one of these characters that I can't believe that 25 years later, we still haven't really done anything with her besides a sticker on Exiles. Like, she should be in Uncanny X-Men. That's all I have to say about her.
Okay, can I jump in on Blink?
Please.
Blink is my number one.
Dun, 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 dun,
Because I knew you wouldn't let me put Nightcrawler on my list. And other than her involvement in Age of Apocalypse, I don't think she's had a story worthy of how cool she is.
She's had a couple miniseries, but they're not great.
They're not. And
yeah, why is she your number one?
Because she's the character that I most want to see more of. And I most want to see her operating on a large scale. Like, and I've said this repeatedly through all of them. I want to see these characters step up. I want to see them be proper, uncanny X-Men.
And we keep saying Uncanny X-Men because it's the flagship, baby.
It's the best title, too. Like, it's a good, sounds good, great adjective.
Yeah, it's not as good as Unscrupulous X-Men.
I'd write Unscrupulous X-Men. Marvel can hire me at any time. I really like multicolored X-Men. Doop is one of my favorites. Nightcrawler is one of my favorites. Is pink a very obvious, probably gendered choice? Sure. Does she look amazing? Yes. And I understand that if Nightcrawler is on the team, you maybe can't have Blink on the team. But here's my hot take. For Unscrupulous X-Men, they're co-leaders. I just think Blink has a lot of really interesting potential. She is very popular.
Yeah.
She's like a fan favorite. And X-Men...
Because she's one of the coolest characters in Age of Apocalypse.
And X-Men tends to really lean into what the fans want. So I'm surprised that she hasn't come back. And she's, one of... I know we really like Age of Apocalypse on this podcast. We've recommended it a number of times, but her design is one of the only designs that still works, I think, in a modern context.
I disagree with that, but sure. Her design hasn't changed.
But a lot of those designs, you're like, that was the 90s.
Well, sure. But I would argue that like X-Man's design still works. If you're talking about like Cyclops, that one doesn't work. But Rogue's design really works. Morph's design really works. Bishop's design works. I would say Apocalypse should have kept the costume from Age of Apocalypse.
Maybe.
It's so much better than his normal dumb 80s costume.
Yeah. And I hesitated actually
cape.
to put Blink on this list because she does have 2 live action adaptations, but she's not the lead in either of them. No.
She barely talks in Days of Future Past.
I don't know if she speaks in Days of Future Past.
I think she says like, this way.
But I would love... I can't remember if her ethnicity is specified in the comics, but I would love if they're going to cast a Chinese actress or Japanese actress. What if we have X-Men in China? What if we explore that? I think that would be really, really interesting. I just think Blink, for me, has the most endless possibilities of what you could do with her.
Sure.
And people love her, so you're just like, why haven't we seen her? But Negasonic Teenage Warhead keeps coming back.
Yeah.
You know, who is like, is she a cool character? I mean, I guess, but she's like not as interesting, I think, as Blink and not as well designed as Blink. And I just think you could do a lot with her. And I get the Nightcrawler of it all, but Nightcrawler ain't on every X-Men team.
That's right.
So teleporting and that type of teleporting is so cool and so unique to X-Men that I'm surprised it hasn't taken off the way telekinesis has.
Well, yeah, it's a little weird. I mean, because Blink goes through portals.
Yeah, she's actually a little more like Vibe is on the Flash than she is like Nightcrawler. She's not bamfing.
Exactly.
I just think she's cool. Like, all of these are just characters that I'm like, they're cool. How come we don't have more from them? Yeah. This is like my angry fangirl list. So Blink is my number one. Jason, who is your number one underrated X-person?
My number one underrated X-Men character has never been on an X-Men team. Has never been on any X-Men affiliation or anything like that. My number one X-Men underrated character is a villain that I think should be used more, has an amazing design, and has such an astounding backstory that they keep forgetting this character exists, or they do stupid stuff like turning this character into a woman for no reason.
Onslaught?
Nope. Mr. Sinister.
Oh, yeah.
Mr. Sinister is my number one underrated X-Men character.
What an interesting pull.
Now, the reason why he is, I think, the most interesting X-Men villain that has, and he's been in a lot of stories, but to me, he's like one of the few X-Men villains that I cannot believe we haven't seen him in a movie yet. And
I agree with that.
I also cannot believe that he doesn't have a bigger status in the X-Men universe because he is so deeply connected to Scott Summers and Jean Grey. He is basically Scott Summers' evil dad. Yeah. That's what he is. And all you have to do is say that and you're like, ooh, that's interesting. Tell me more. Like the fact that most of Scott Summers' childhood is lies because it was Mr. Sinister pretending, because he's a shapeshifter, pretending to be that person is such a fascinating aspect. And the idea that Mr. Sinister was like so obsessed with this idea of controlling mutant kind that he was like, okay, I'm going to test every X-Men character. I'm going to find the perfect genetic profile. Oh, Scott Summers and Jean Grey. Okay, cool. Well, they need to have a baby so that I can control that mutant and it becomes Cable. Again, he has multiple aliases. He has multiple clones. Again, like he was turned into a female version of it. He's practically impossible to kill. And I think his design, which really hasn't changed since the 80s, it's a little dated, but
it's a good design though.
But I think it works because it's only two colors, or it's three colors. It's white, red, and blue, and it's mostly blue. And I just think like there was that rumor that John Hamm was going to play him in New Mutants.
He is always rumored as the villain of the next X-Men. Mysterio was actually like that for Spider-Man for a long time too.
And he's had two references in the X-Men movies. At the end of X-Men Apocalypse, it's the Essex Corporation because his real name is Nathaniel Essex. And in I believe the other one was, there's another one. Oh, in Deadpool 2, it says the Essex House for Mutant Children, which is just like, oh, that's definitely intentional. But anyways,
John Hamm would have been a great choice.
He would have been a great choice. But Mr. Sinister, if you don't know, again, he's the shape-shifting guy. He was one of the horsemen of the Apocalypse for a while. And then you kind of learn that his whole storyline is about like taking down Apocalypse because he thinks Apocalypse is a big evil guy. I honestly think that you could tell such a great X-Men storyline where Mr. Sinister is sort of your Professor X. And that this team is sort of like working for Mr. Sinister. And they're like, I don't know, do we trust this guy? Like, but he's so smart that you're like,
You make him like the ultimate psychopath, like he's a great manipulator.
Exactly. But he's like, we need to, this threat is way bigger than me, guys, and you guys need to take out this threat. And because I can plan like 17 steps ahead of you, I know exactly everything you need to do. And I know your powers better than you know them. So this is the combination. This is how you take them down.
Listeners, we do have lessons on Scott Summers and Jean Grey where Mr. Sinister is very prominently featured too, if you want to hear more. We don't have a lesson on him specifically, though.
Oh, and also a merchandise spotlight. There are two Mr. Sinister Marvel Legends action figures. They've just made a recent one, and the recent one looks amazing.
Cool.
Also, Mr. Sinister in the Age of Apocalypse storyline is the main villain of X-Men.
Your favorite series with Forge.
And he has an amazing redesign in Age of Apocalypse because he has a goatee.
That's a plus.
And they also redesigned his costume. I think the Age of Apocalypse costume is better than the normal one. But he kills Forge.
Oh, nice.
He kills Forge in Age of Apocalypse. But Mr. Sinister is my most underrated X-Men character because I think he's a villain that does not get his due, and I believe he was created by Louise Simonson, and if that's the case, then we need to give Louise her due.
Yeah.
Or Mr. Claremont. I'm gonna look that up real quick, but that's my list.
It's a good list.
There you go. Actually, you're scrambling to look for something.
I'm scrambling to look for who Mr. Sinister was created by Chris Claremont and Mark Silvestri.
Okay, so Chris Claremont. My apologies.
Because Chris Claremont created all the X-Men characters that we like.
Oh, see, I thought Mr. Sinister showed up in X Factor, and that was written by Louise Simonson. She created Apocalypse.
You know what? Louise Simonson just doesn't get enough due, so let's give it up for Louise Simonson.
There you go.
She's the best.
All right, so let's move into the recommended reading. Ashley, what's that?
The recommended reading is the part of the podcast where if you liked anything that we talked about here and you go over to geekhistorylesson.com/recommended reading, you can check out our recommendations. There's a little widget, you buy it, some support comes back to us, no extra cost to you, and you get something to read.
That's right. Well, I have 2 choices for this, and then Ashley, I would like you to pick one storyline from any of your characters to be the third. The first one I'm going to pick is there is a trade paperback called X-Men, Cyclops, and Phoenix, Past and Future. This collects all the adventures of Cyclops and Phoenix storylines. The second one in that storyline is about the origin of Mr. Sinister. And I think it's a great story. By the way, the adventures of Cyclops and Phoenix, there's like 2 to 3 of them. They're all actually really good. They're actually really, really good.
They're fairly new-ish collections too, aren't they?
The collections are new, but these miniseries were published like back in like 94. Yeah. They were just never collected.
Cool.
The other one I'm going to give you, the other trade that I think you should read is All New Doop.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. And
that's a really fun book.
It's all about Doop. It's about his, he has a crush on Kitty Pryde.
Of course.
And he needs to convince Kitty Pryde to marry him. Yes. Ashley, what would you put as the third?
So most of these characters, their best stories we've actually recommended in other lessons. So when I look at my list, I actually want to recommend Astonishing X-Men Volume 1. It's the only good volume of Astonishing X-Men because that's the one that Armor is introduced in.
It's your first appearance, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And it has never been recommended, so that's why I am picking this.
Cool.
And yeah, get all of those at geekhistorylesson.com/recommended reading.
Now, before we move on to the next section of the podcast, I want to mention, if you don't know, Geek History Lesson Extra. This is an extra podcast that we do on our Patreon, patreon.com/Jawiin. And that's where you can support this podcast that is free to you, and our YouTube videos and all the stuff we do. We do a lot of stuff over there, a lot of great content. We want you to come over and be a super friend and support this podcast. This week's episode, Geek History Lesson Extra, that you can only hear on Patreon. By the way, Geek History Lesson Extra has over 120 episodes now.
Yeah, man. We've been doing it forever.
120 episodes. There's a whole back catalog. This week's episode is underrated X-Men characters that should have a solo movie.
I didn't know if we were going to go something like that or if we were going to go overrated X-Men characters.
No. I think it's better to talk about like an X-Men character that we think probably could carry their own movie.
I love it.
And should probably deserve their own movie. So you can only hear that on Patreon. If you are one of our patrons, guys, we thank you so much for our support of our patrons. Our patrons are literally
the best.
They are so awesome. And we're able to do so many stuff like Crisis Club, this comic book that you're only going to be able to read on Patreon that I wrote called Super Best Friend. I'm only able to do that because of the support of the Patreon. Thank you so much to all of you. And if you want to join the super friends over there, go to at the Hall of Justice, patreon.com/Jawiin. All right, Ashley, we're going into the honor roll.
Yes.
What is that?
That is where if you open up your little Apple Podcast app and you go to Geek History Lesson and you rate us 5 stars, we will read whatever you want because much like reviewing a book on iTunes or on Amazon and Goodreads.
You can review a book on Apple Books.
Great. This helps more awesome people find us. It helps us continue to grow the podcast. So we have 2 amazing people joining us today. First is awesome Nick04. Who says, amazing podcast with, I think, 7 exclamation points.
Ooh.
This podcast, if you couldn't tell from the title, is amazing. I've learned so much about my favorite characters and characters I didn't really care about before this podcast. The co-hosts are amazing, from Jason Insert Punter Joke here Inman and Ashley Robinson, who have a great chemistry that they make me feel like you're having a discussion with them. If you love 2 geeky, awesome people, then this podcast is for you. Seriously, stop reading this and listen to them. By the way, Jason and Ashley, can we get either a Spider-Man Noir or Ultimate Spider-Man episode? Well, awesome, Nick.
We've hinted at Ultimate Spider-Man for quite a while.
I am happy to report, though, if you like Ultimate Spider-Man, we do cover Ultimate Spider-Man in our Peter Parker series and our Miles Morales series.
But not to we have talked about having a whole episode about Ultimate Spider-Man. Spider-Man Noir is a great choice, actually.
Sure, that might be a future book club. So the answer to that is maybe.
Sure.
The second review.
We added it to the list.
Yes. We add all your suggestions to the list. We will either die or get to them all someday, I promise. Our next edition is 247 Ham Man, who says, this podcast rocks, with 3 exclamation points. I've been reading comics since I was 7 or 8 years old, and I'm still learning so much. And this podcast is a huge reason why. With great discussions about the deep history and lore of the characters, you also get banter and chemistry that elevates the podcast to be the cream of the crop. Love this podcast so much, and nothing is better than when you enter the Mind University. Oh, I love that.
Ooh, I like that. Thank you so much. Well, welcome into the Teacher's Lounge. Because you left us a 5-star review, you are allowed to complete the Sudoku puzzles left on the coffee table by Mrs. Grayson.
What does Mrs. Grayson teach?
Mrs. Grayson, of course, teaches Spanish 101 in Spanish only. She never
Not
says
acrobatics?
She never says English in that class. She only talks in Spanish.
Wow.
She's pretty amazing.
That's not nice.
It's a hard class. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You just walk in and she's just like,
Hola, ¿cómo estás?
hola, me llamo Señora Grayson. And you're like, what does that mean?
You can tell our Spanish is A+ here
I
at the
took
Mind
Spanish
University.
way back in ¿Dónde está la biblioteca?
I never took it.
Yes. Tus ojos es más azul en todos del mundo.
My eyes are the most blue in the world?
Yes, that's like a phrase I remember. I flirted that to my Spanish teacher in my final in high school, and I got an A.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Was she cute?
She was okay.
Was she as cute as Mrs. Grayson?
Mrs. Grayson is a gem.
Great.
So, all right, let's move on. Thank you so much for everybody that does that. And don't forget, you can subscribe and download this podcast on Spotify, SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, and everywhere you listen to podcasts. So just make sure you do that. Click the download button. What's wrong with you? Just click it. It's right there. Click download. Do it. And also, we want to do something. Guys, we love Geek History Lesson to grow. So if you enjoy this podcast and you have a friend that's into comic books or geeky things or stuff like that, and you think they'd enjoy the podcast too, tell them about it. Tell your friends about the Mind University. We want to spread the love of this podcast around. And Ashley, if they want to suggest future lists like most overrated X-Men, where should they do that?
1 through 5, Gambit. You can do that at geekhistorylesson.com, facebook.com/geekhistorylesson, or on Twitter at GHL Podcast. There's a whole bunch of ways to contact us in all of those places. And believe me, we have a 400-item list of suggestions. We take all of your suggestions.
Number 1 is Wolverine. All right. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Jawiin. I'm Jawiin. And Ashley is on Twitter at Ashley V. Robinson. And now we're at to hashtag stick around. Ashley.
Yeah.
Thoughts on Maggot, one of the underrated, overrated X-Men characters, the joke, the butt of jokes, the X-Men character that had 2 slugs over the side of his shoulders that were actually part of his intestines, who had a weird Joe Madeira design, who they actually made an action figure of. Merchandise Spotlight. Been a lot of Merchandise Spotlights. I love it. Mm-hmm. We should just do a podcast called Merchandise Spotlight. Ashley, thoughts on Maggot?
Stupid.
All right, it's pretty good.
I mean, it's hard for me to have, Maggot's disgusting. Maggot was obviously created as a joke.
He was created as a joke. That is on record.
Yes. The character, for me, serves no utility. He's You can do body horror X-Men. There's that one X-Men who's basically just a bunch of goo and floating eyes that Grant Morrison created.
Oh, yeah. I can't remember his name.
And that's a very body horror idea, but it's done... No offense to the 2 creators of Maggot, because I like them both. It's done more intelligently. And I just think, for me, Maggot exemplifies everything that's bad about that time in X-Men comics.
It's fine.
That's all. If you love Maggot, that's also fine.
He has a cool design.
He does not.
Yeah, he does. The first cover he ever appeared on, drawn by Joe Madeira, he looks cool, and he's never been better than that. And that's all I got to say. Thank you so much for listening to Geek History Lesson. I am Jason, Maggot's #1 fan, Inman.
I am Ashley Victoria Robinson, and Professor Jason, with the maggots over your shoulder. Would you please dismiss the class?
Hello, I'm back.
Oh, welcome back, Charles.
Did you find hope in the episode?
I think we did. We found hope for the future of the X-Books.
Oh. I'm looking for hope.
I've heard that.
You need to learn to hope again.
Do you want to play chess?
No.
Okay.
I only play chess with buxom and attractive mutants of English/German descent.
I don't know if I'd describe Magneto as buxom.
Oh, I would, Ashley.
Do you want to talk about Once and Future King?
Yes. The book by T.S. Eliot is... Oh, wait, hold on. I'm sensing the Phoenix. I have to go check this out.
You didn't dismiss the class, Chuck.